Warm welcome all to the Impact Funding Social Summit 2020. I'm Rutupan Shinde, and today we have an interesting fireside chat organized on topic pivoting at scale for NGOs and social entrepreneurs. To discuss and give the insights on this topic, we have eminent speaker today with us. I will take this opportunity to introduce quickly our very first honorable speaker. He is a social entrepreneur, a change maker, co-founder and CEO of Ruben Bridge Pvt Ltd. And he is sought after speaker at various conferences around the world and has shared his innovative ideas and thoughts at prestigious forums like TEDx Gateway, TEDx Global Links Park, and in conferences. Please welcome Mr. Madan Padaki. Welcome, Madan Padaki. It's a pleasure to have you on this forum. Moving to our next speaker, we have today with us the head of Piramal Foundation, a leading Indian foundation committed to addressing social issues through high impact solutions. At Piramal Foundation, he is responsible for overall CSR activity implemented through its initiative, including Piramal Swasthya, Piramal Foundation for Education Leadership, and Piramal Sarvajal. Please welcome Mr. Paresh Parasnis. Welcome, sir. And I hand it over to both of you to start with the conversation on a topic, pivoting at scale for NGOs and social enterprise.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Ritu. Thanks for bringing us together. Appreciate it and appreciate all the efforts that you guys have put together to bring this massive online impact conference together. When you guys reached out to me and said, "Hey, we would want you to be talking to Paresh," without even thinking, batting an eyelid, I said I would love to. Paresh, if you remember, we have fond memories and huge respect for what you did to us to get us started as Head and Eye Foundation, because I think you were instrumental in giving us our first rural BPO contract, so to speak, when you got our zero educated illiterate village youth to start doing insurance claims processing out of Koppal. It was almost like, I think, 10, 12 years ago. Right? So
almost a decade ago. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, rarely does a day pass without we discussing how we got started. So really a pleasure to get onto this conversation with you, and look forward to a engaging 45 minutes to an hour of learning and peeling the layers of the onion, so to speak, in getting to the bottom of this topic. So welcome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Madan. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the organizers for inviting me for this session. It's great to be back with you. As you said, it goes back a long, long way. I think from where Head Held High started, and I think what we did together when I was in my earlier corporate avatar. But great to be back. Thank you. Thanks.
Wonderful. And to kickstart the conversation, Paresh, maybe that's where I want to pick up the threads from. Right? You were in the other side, or the dark side, or whatever side you call that as, in a fully corporate role with HDFC, Standard Life, and a range of corporate experiences before that. And you switched over. You joined the Piramal Foundation as its CEO. This is almost 8 years ago. So just want to dwell a little bit on your personal journey itself. What triggered the change for you? And how's the journey been over the last 8 years? What have been the key learnings that you've seen from the vantage point? And you've done some amazing stuff at the foundation. We'll get to that a little later. But love to hear your perspectives over the last 8-10 years.
Sure. I think the last 8 years has really given me enough time, Madan, I would say, to dwell on this journey and really think through what the experiences have been like. I think making the move was not easy. I think at the time I made the move, and that was 2012, early 2012, I think the sector was still kind of still getting to grips with attracting, in a sense, crossover talent. And that's what we call ourselves today. And I think it took a long time for me, almost I would say 2.5, 3 years, to really figure out what is it that I could do in a sector which I had absolutely no experience of. I think it was a calling of the heart. And that really came from multiple experiences. As a senior leader in HDFC Life Insurance, I think I did used to have the opportunity of going out and meeting multiple investors, fund managers, research analysts. I think at that time, one would always talk about the journey of life insurance, pensions, health insurance, and how underpenetrated a market India was. And you would talk about the demographic dividend. And so, what a great marketplace this was. And it continues, the story continues even today, right? But I think when you go to the hinterlands, and I still kind of recollect that experience, one of the requirements of the business was to do rural insurance, like you have priority sector banking. And when you go into rural hinterlands, we would talk to non-profits and we would talk to NGOs as distribution partners. And on one such journey to Tamil Nadu, I still remember, we went around the whole day across villages to talk to potential clients, to the distribution partner. I think that's when you actually see that the demographic dividend that we talk about, the existence or at times more the non-existence of that demographic dividend. I think when people are really worried about good education for their kids, about basic healthcare facilities, about where the next meal is going to come from, I think something changes. And I think that was the change that, in a sense, stayed with me. That was a change that forced me to think, to read, go out and meet a lot of people, to really say that with my corporate experience of close to 25 years at that time, close to 30 years at that time, was there something I could do in my own way, in my own small way, to really contribute to the development of the country, of society in some form and manner. I think that led to the shift. I think absolutely no regrets over the last 8 years. Thoroughly enjoyed what I wanted to do and that I have been doing. I think the foundation, the Piramal Foundation, has been a great platform to try out a lot of new ideas and entrepreneurial energies that one brings to the table from time to time. So yeah, I think it's really coming together of the head and heart is how I would put it.
Terrific. I think it's not easy to make that shift in a easier transition, but I think with your conviction that it's the head and heart together, how do you build something of value is the key. If you were to reflect on the last 8 years in your own evolution of seeing the world or seeing the social sector, both from the non-profits to social enterprises, what are your key reflections and learnings from this journey that you've been through the last 8 years?
I think one continues to learn even today, right, Madan? So yes, I think 2 or 3 dimensions maybe we could just kind of use as the building blocks of this conversation. One was, I think, the subject that the organizers have, in a sense, asked us to speak on, which is about scale. And I still remember that one of my early conversations when I was making that move, and I had to meet a whole lot of senior people who had an interest in Piramal Foundation as part of the whole assessment process. And in one of the conversations, I was asked saying, why do you even want to work at the Piramal Foundation to try out new things? And I said, this is a great platform to take things to scale. I mean, the foundation at that time was about 5 or 6 years old, had established itself in terms of its solutions. I think what we can do to take these solutions to scale across the country is a great platform. And the gentleman on the other side just asked me, he said, do you know how many villages there are in India? And as naive as I took the question to be, I said, yes, it was a naive answer. I said 650,000 villages. And he just smiled and moved on to the next part of the conversation. I didn't even realize what the road when I reflect back on some of those questions that people asked me. I think the dimension of scale or the criticality or the difficulties of scale is what comes back, right? So I think scale is nice as a word, all of us talk scale, but to make it happen in the context that we are in is I think takes a lot of doing, and we can kind of talk about that as we go along. I think the second learning, as you call it, Madan, would be about people. I think in the corporate sector, one is used to what I would call the command and control structure, and life goes on. The motivations that people have, people who are in this space, people who are contributing with so much of passion and so much of commitment in the space, all the team members, all the board members, that passion and that commitment, unless one understands that and what drives people to be in this space and to do what they do day after day, employee motivation has really no meaning. It is never about the salary, it is never about the compensation, it's never about the designation or the next role. And to understand that, I think there's a nice Hindi word I would use, nooks, to understand that. And to really understand what encourages people to do what they do is so critical. I think the kind of amazing people that I've met in this journey, which just gives you new air under your wings in a sense to go higher and higher. I think it's just the commitment and passion that people bring to doing what they do day in and day out. I think has been a huge learning. I think made some great friends. Admire a whole lot of people who have been in this space and were doing this just not for any material reason, but for just doing because they believe this is the right thing to do. I think, and in that sense, I think it has helped me personally to really go back and understand the core purpose of what I am here. I think, end of the day, that's what is the question that one comes back to many times and saying, what are we here for? Are we here to run projects? Are we here to raise more money? Or are we really here to improve the cause of someone who's not as privileged as we are? And I think the core essence of everything that we do in the foundation, which in our own words and the words or the ethos of the Piramal group revolves around Seva Bhav. And I think we bring that to the table. Everything in the world, in a sense, conspires to make it happen. I think that's really been a huge learning. There are other things, but we can talk about it as we go along. Let me just pause here.
Sure. Perfect. And
sure.
So you talked about Paresh. You talked about scale, people, and the seva bhav that you see very prevalent everywhere. One question that I wanted to ask you, especially given the vantage point, is that there is a fair bit of, I wouldn't call it definition confusion. I'm not talking about structural things, but the whole NGO and social enterprises and enterprises conundrum, right? That if you were to really look at the intersection of doing good, feeling good, and making good money, the world seems to be cleaved in saying, oh, I'll just do good and forget about the money part. And the other side says, I'll just make good money, forget about the doing good part. Right? And what obviously we need to do is operate the intersection of that. So how has your experiences been with resolving this so-called conundrum of feeling good, doing good, and making, I wouldn't call it good money, but making it sustainable?
Right.
Itself.
Right. Yeah, I think sustainable might be more like it, right?
Yeah,
Rather than the money dimension.
yeah.
No, I think it's been interesting because in the Piramal Foundation we have our work in education, whereas the work that we do in safe drinking water is
Hmm.
really what I would call a social enterprise, and which has,
Ah.
in a sense, like you said, a revenue model and so on and
Hmm.
so forth.
Hmm.
Uh, I think end of the day, to my mind, as you said, it's more a structural difference and what you're trying to build for. I think if you look at more, I would say the similarities. End of the day, we are all coming up with a solution. I wouldn't call it a product to serve communities.
Hmm.
Now, whether it's a product or a service or a solution which communities are able to pay for is the question. And we
Hmm.
have similar examples even in health and in education. There are
Hmm.
organizations who do provide this as a service where communities end up paying for it. So I think the differentiation in the sense becomes a little artificial. I think
Hmm.
the fact that end of the day, both these solutions have to be solutions which the community accepts, which I wouldn't call it a beneficiary because that's a very has a
Yeah.
different connotation. I think communities
Correct.
is what I would prefer.
Yeah.
Unless they accept the solution or the product that you're providing, you have to keep going back to the drawing board and coming up with something that will solve the problem. Because end of the day, I believe that we're all trying to solve for the same problem. The community has a demand and a need that as an organization, whether it's a non-profit or a social enterprise, we're trying to, in a sense, meet. Uh, I think the third dimension, which to my mind is similar, is all these solutions and the adoption of these solutions demands some kind of what I think in our context or our parlance we call behavior change, right?
Hmm.
There's
Hmm.
always a dimension where I'm going to try out something which has not been tried in the past. The recipient has to do something different from what he or she has done in the past. And to that
Hmm.
extent, that adjustment of behavior or that
Hmm.
different way of approaching a particular problem, I think is common to both sides, whether you're selling or offering a product or a service. Uh, I think the only difference I would, in a sense, look at is which is the space that you straddle.
Correct. Hmm.
As possibly a social enterprise, you straddle the space between a business and community.
Hmm.
Whereas in a philanthropic activity, a non-profit activity, you are straddling a space which is between, I would say, the government and the community. I
Hmm.
think that is the only differentiation that I can possibly talk about. And it's
Hmm.
interesting because, and it's both these are at the cusp. They're not really in either clearly in one part of the business or in
Correct.
another part of the business, right? They're always at the cusp.
Hmm.
Uh, I think if I have to look at, let's take the example of what I understand a little better. If you look at education,
Hmm.
education has had infrastructure that part of the activity, social activity, and over time, many of the children are actually in school, right? We had the
Correct.
Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, so enrollment improved. Today, we are focused on quality of education. But you look
Hmm.
at healthcare, you have the frontline health workers, but you don't have enough infrastructure. So,
Hmm.
what does the community avail of? Where do they go? And we still have challenges in terms of access. If I look at
Hmm.
water, there is no frontline health worker in the water space at the village level or at a block level. And unfortunately, many a times, even the infrastructure is missing. So, you're trying to
Hmm.
even create the infrastructure to deliver that solution.
Hmm.
Uh, so I think it's really a combination of infrastructure, the availability of a service, and the front line, which
Hmm.
actually makes it available at the doorstep of that individual. and a combination, and what makes that combination work, I think decides whether it falls in a government space, whether it falls in non-profit space, or whether it falls in the social enterprise space. I think end of the day, we are really, to my mind, splitting hairs, is my sense. I think the report that's recently been put out on the social stock exchange also, the draft report, also says that end of the day, you define what you are, leaving to the market layer to define which category he or she falls in.
Sure, it makes a lot of sense. In fact, when I moved out from Manipal education and health, from a corporate role to get onto headed high and then one bridge, a lot of people ask me, so what's the difference? And I grappled with the enterprise versus the social enterprise conundrum for some time.
Right.
And a year later, I realized that maybe we're framing it wrong, right? Maybe the world is not divided into enterprises and social enterprises. Maybe the world is divided into enterprises and anti-social enterprises. Right? And therefore...
That's an interesting way of putting it, yes.
Yeah, should every enterprise look at itself as solving a problem for the community in a way that they benefit and the value that is derived from that benefit is sustainable? Right?
Absolutely.
At the heart, you choose a space, but once you've chosen the space and the way you'll operate, you have to behave like an enterprise in the sense that you have to provide value, you have to derive that value, and you have to make sure that your costs are lower than what you're getting paid for. Right? That makes it sustainable.
Completely. And I think that's when even non-profits, you talked about sustainability as part of the question. I think when the external world sees non-profits deliver value to communities, and when you start seeing the results of a lot of this work happening over a period of time, whether you call it impact assessment or the measurement of results, I don't think capital is scarce. There's enough capital out there.
Exactly.
I think there's enough capital to back good causes and good projects.
Exactly.
That is never in short supply.
Exactly.
So you've got it absolutely right. Yes.
Yeah, and that's the same issue that we've seen in the entrepreneurial world also, right? That you find a lot of entrepreneurs who say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And the pat comes the answer, "I'm trying to raise money." Now, raising money is a function of what you're attempting to do.
Yes.
If you're doing the right things in the right way that makes sense to the communities, money will follow.
That's
right. So it brings me to the point that I think, one of the lesser used words that we see in the social space, apart from social enterprises and social entrepreneurs, is really the entrepreneurial mindset that one needs to operate in. And I would argue that the entrepreneurial mindset, the strength of the entrepreneurial mindset required to solve social issues, it needs to be far, far greater than, let's say, doing food delivery in Bangalore. Right? Because, as you said, you're also dealing with another variable of behavior change, that you also want to create circumstances in which people are changing behaviors not because of some external incentive, but can you go deeper and get them to see the benefit that will accrue to them. So I'm sure this role over the last 8 years must have been hugely entrepreneurial with all of its ups, downs, roller coaster ride for you, Paresh. Itself. How do you see? So do you really see yourself as an entrepreneur heading a foundation? How, when you wake up in the morning, what's the hat that you wear?
So, no, I think, to be frank and to be very honest, I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't think I have the mindset, Madan, that you bring to building a business. I think your DNA is made very differently. But I think I was extremely fortunate that I, in a sense, started working with a team which was extremely entrepreneurial. Whether I look at someone like Aditya Nataraj, who started our entire education initiative, and he's grown it to what it is today. The Gandhi Fellowship that he and the team started, what we started doing in the safe water space, and we have Anuj Sharma, who today heads Sarvajal. I think the DNA of developing or building and developing a business and I'm using a wrong word possibly here. It's not business, it's really an organization. It's something that comes naturally to these individuals. And to that extent, I think while I'm not an entrepreneur, I think it was really trying to find the right balance or the right complementarity between what I was trying to bring to the table based on my 30 years of corporate experience and what the entrepreneur in a sense was trying to build. I think one of the first realizations for me, and I keep saying that today, to all the CEOs, is that I think I quickly had to realize that I was never going to be a domain expert. I was not going to be an expert on education, health, or water. These people who built the organization possibly had forgotten more than what I had ever read. And to that extent, carving out the roles of what he would do as building that organization and that part of the organization in health or in education. And what is it that I would do in building the foundation with a common face to the external world, with common set of values, with common principles that all of us operate on, I think was the journey of the first 1.5 years. I think we are pretty clear in our own way that there is an element, for instance, as the organization scales, governance starts becoming far more important than possibly when you're starting off.
Correct.
And how do you build governance frameworks in a manner that doesn't impede the business, but actually supports the business? Right? So what are the checks and balances? What are the frameworks that you put into place? How do you socialize these? How do you adapt these for the sector that we are in? I think becomes extremely important. So I think finding the common ground or the space where we are not stepping on each other's toes, but really helping each other build a good organization and hopefully a good institution is something that was early learning. So not an entrepreneur, but I hope I can support entrepreneurs to make it to the next level.
No, that's a fascinating insight. You're saying the yin and the yang, right? How do you bring both the entrepreneurial mindsets as well as growing the organizational mindset together in a structured way to make sure that you're able to scale initiatives, right? In as less friction as possible.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, I think whatever we are trying to do are issues or problems that are not going to be solved in a year or 2 years, right? All of us know that, right? These are such complex issues that they're going to go for decades beyond my lifetime. I think all of us understand that. So what is it that you're really doing to build something that will outlast all of us is extremely crucial. And when I use the word institution, and one of the things that I was tasked with saying, how do we institutionalize what we are doing as a foundation? To me, that word, having come from the HDFC family, has a very different connotation than an organization or a company. I think when you look at institutions in India, you would think in this space, the Tata Trust is an institution.
Correct.
That all of us look up to, right?
Yeah.
Internationally, you would say the Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation. In recent times, one would talk about the Gates Foundation. I mean, just for an organization to survive and grow for a century, to adapt and be flexible, and still be meaningfully contributing to social issues is such a humongous learning. And that makes it so aspirational for people to want to be part of that journey.
Correct.
So how do we build something which can really kind of get to that stage in times to come? I think is really a driving force for, I think, all of us who think scale.
Yeah. No, I think it's a wonderful point you made. That I keep saying that in an entrepreneurial journey, at least when I reflect back on my times at Meritrack and now, it goes through 3 phases, right? You become an entrepreneur because you think I can do it. So you always start off with I will do it myself phase. Then you have to transition at the right time to I will get it done phase, right? Where you build a team and the team starts imbibing the organization's entrepreneurial spirit, so on and so forth. But the most critical one for scale is when you say it will happen, when you put systems in place in such a way that things happen, seamlessly in some form, right? That's the institutionalizing mechanisms that you're talking about.
Absolutely.
And I think that journey is super critical. Otherwise, you get a lot of these stunted organizations which never grow to the potential that it exists in that space.
Absolutely. Yes. And I
So
think, sorry, please go.
No, you had a point. Yeah.
No, I was just saying that what you articulated so beautifully, saying I will do it, the team will do it, and then it, in a sense, moves into auto mode. I think we are realizing, Madan, that the kind of work that each of these spaces involves, then really has to the fourth stage for me is really then what goes beyond the organization. And when I say that, it's really saying that today, for instance, within the foundation, we have come up with a framework, a homegrown framework, loosely modeled on your capability maturity model of the IT industry.
Wow, okay. Yeah.
Right? To really say that while we start from pilots, we start from innovations, that's where the risk capital goes in. Right? You then take it to a stage where others say, yeah, this seems to be working, government gets interested, other partners come in saying, yeah, we are happy to support this. But then how does it go to something which really solves the problems of the country? When we talk about SDGs, when we talk about what will happen 10 years hence, if India has to reduce maternal mortality from its current level of 130 deaths for every 100,000 live births to 70, which is really halving what we currently are at in 10 years' time, it's not Piramal Foundation who's going to make that happen.
Exactly.
To that extent, how do we build something which is going to go beyond the organization in what we are calling a collaborative or a collective effort?
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's absolutely the thought process that we are, when we looked at G.A.M.E, the Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship that I co-founded with Ravi and Macon, that was the question that we asked. We said, if you want to solve for 150 million livelihoods and you have to create 10 to 15 million entrepreneurs who can create that many jobs, there's no single organization that can do it. But if we collectively work towards it in a synchronized way, maybe we stand a chance of cracking that puzzle. Right. So I think that fourth evolution is very critical to attempt scale. So I think in a way, you answered the question that I had, but I want to still pose it again and see if there's any other nuance or any other direction you want to come from, right? When you see it from the outside, you look at, there's a huge amount of work that you guys are doing in water. Then there is healthcare and sanitation. Then there is education, right? It's all very large problem areas, seemingly unrelated. Right, and obviously with the might of the Piramal Foundation and the thinking, you obviously want to achieve scale. So, what is the common thing that binds all of these initiatives itself? Was a question that I had. I think in a way you answered it. It's about the institutionalizing process. It's about systems. It's about governance. But how do you see this? So I'm sure, as you said, if you start getting into being a domain expert in each of these areas, it's going to take a lifetime to master each of these areas itself, right?
Absolutely.
So how do you view it as the CEO of Piramal Foundation running separate different initiatives? What is the common thread that binds all of this to achieve scale?
Okay. So I think, again, I'll maybe bring in 2 or 3 dimensions, Madan, and let's kind of see how that goes. I talked about the framework that we have developed internally. I think one of the clear philosophies that the Piramal Foundation has been that the capital that the Piramal group puts in, whether it's the corporate or the Piramal family as its philanthropic contribution, is essentially seen as risk capital. Right? And that goes to the DNA of the group, which is very entrepreneurial, which takes risks, which builds businesses over time. And when I say risk capital, it's really saying that if there are problems that we are trying to tackle, which have not been solved for the last 70 years, then you need an approach which is not just doing more of the same. You need an approach which has not been tried in the past.
Correct.
And so to that extent, it's an approach which may work or it may not work. I mean, both can happen, right? We know that when it comes to innovation. The risk capital is essentially to say, let's try out an approach. Let's give it our best shot. Let's see what happens over a couple of years or whatever milestone we put. And then if it works, let's scale it. If it doesn't, let's go back to the drawing board. I think moving from risk capital to where we will put in our whole and soul and really go after it, that is a space or that is a time when no external funder is willing to come in. But when you have demonstrated that results happen, that's when external funding comes in. And that's where the Piramal group will step back saying, I will now use my capital to solve the next possible problem. The external scale capital is what will take it to scale, right? So that's one clear dimension that comes into our thinking. The second is, I think, again, mimicking this journey. If I have to say, how does the model work? At stage one, it's something that we are doing on our own, through our own efforts, through our own teams, working with knowledge partners, working with the best technical experts there are. But I think over time, one realizes that, as we discussed in the earlier part of this conversation, we can't do everything ourselves. It's too large a problem for us to even aspire to solve at a country level. And so how do we get into partnerships and then the next stage, which is really collaborations? So to give you an example from our own experience, Madan, we've been working in a place called Araku Valley in Visakhapatnam district for the last 8 years on tribal maternal health. About 2.5 years ago, we realized that the 180 habitations that we worked in, not a single expecting mother had passed away during childbirth, right? And we said, this is great. Now, how do you really solve the problems of maternal mortality in tribal areas? We said we have to scale. So we went to a large part of Vizag, half of Vizag is tribal, and started kind of scaling our model. When you look at India, India has 100 million tribals, or a little more than that. Maternal mortality is typically 2.5 or 3 times the national average.
Wow.
And so last year we said that we are going to really work with like-minded partners to set what we are calling a tribal health collaborative. So our team went and really studied what Dr. is doing through search, what Jan Swasthya Sahayog does in Chhattisgarh, what Seva is doing in Gujarat, what Ekjut is doing in Jharkhand, because these are people who have committed their lives to tribal health. We have to learn as a community, support each other, and really take this to scale. That can only happen when it goes outside of the foundation. So we're saying that the Tribal Health Collaborative will be an independent entity that all of us will be part of. So you have funding partners coming in. You have knowledge partners coming in, you have technical partners coming in, you have technology partners coming in. So you're really building a collaborative to take a much more holistic approach to solving that problem, not just going after implementation and projects all the time. So I think that's something which I think as a thought process runs across everything that we do. I think the third one is really how do you really develop a solution? I think that's the third dimension I would want to put on the table. Really saying that when we are developing a solution, we are doing this in-house, we are piloting it. But when it is ready to be demonstrated at scale, I think it's extremely critical that you make the solution what I call open source. How can others come and learn from what you have done? They would, of course, need to adapt it to their conditions. But at the core, if there is an idea which has worked, how can that be really made available to a larger ecosystem? Because I think that is what will make scale happen.
I think that is, I'm trying to get the right framing into this, but I think you said it very well, because what you're saying is, first learn to do it ourselves, get the risk capital behind the solution, or around figuring out what works. Go out, get as many people involved in solutioning itself, right? As you talked about the tribal healthcare collaborative, I'm sure you had a set of experiences in Araku Valley, maybe Jharkhand would have had a separate set of experiences. Somebody else in Madhya Pradesh would have done things differently. When you bring everybody together, everybody is learning and collaborating at the same time. And the third aspect that you're talking about is really platforming, so to speak, using the geeky word, so to speak, is saying that once you've got it ready, how do you create a plug and play system where people don't have to reinvent the wheel all over again? Right? And anybody who wants to work in the solution can take it, adapt it, and use it in any which way they want.
Yes. So I think a common, absolutely, you kind of summarized it so well, Madan. It's really moving from implementing projects to building platforms of the future. And I think if we have that vision, if we have that objective, I'm sure all of us will kind of move in that direction.
Yeah, exactly. And if you were to just take an arc and kind of from where you are to where you would want to be, where you would want the foundation to be 10 years hence, and just taking 10 years as some number, it could be 5, 8 or whatever. All right. What would your wish look like? Right. And what do you think are the key challenges or key learnings that you have to get to make that happen?
Maybe I think the 10 years is extremely relevant because it happens to be then 2030. It happens to be Sustainable Development Goals, right?
Exactly.
So to that extent, maybe the 10 years is quite relevant to the conversation.
Yeah.
What would success look like?
Yeah.
I think the only dimension I would take to defining success, and irrespective of whether we are a non-profit or a social enterprise, Madan, is really to say, have communities progressed? In whatever form and manner. I think going by any measure that we might have set for ourselves, are children learning better? Is India number of people mothers dying during childbirth? Are more kids kind of surviving their 5th birthday? Are more kids dying? Are more kids kind of surviving despite diarrhea? I think one would, in a sense, sign up for. I think to me, it's more an outside-in measure rather than an inside-out measure saying, how big have I become and how much of funds am I attracting?
Exactly.
I think to take it to the next level, I would say, I think success would mean how do we make ourselves irrelevant? I think end of the day, if there comes a point when as a foundation, as an organization, my need is not felt, I think to me that's success.
Exactly.
Because then you have really solved a problem. It's like what Nandan says, that how do I go after a problem which is defined as inch wide and mile deep? How do I really go down so deep into that problem that I can eliminate it at some point of time? And hopefully once it's eliminated, my reason to continue to contribute in that space is no longer relevant. Hopefully then we can go on with our limited capital into some other problem area. I think to me that is success.
Lovely. Now, one last question, which is also a sign of times, but also it's in the topic. We've used the word pivoting, and pivoting usually is used in the context of dramatically changing something in the way you do things or the way you're addressing your market. I would want to extend that to adapting to situations, right? How do you continuously keep evolving and adapting so that you're getting closer and closer to the goals that you set. And as you said, the goals could be linked to SDGs, the goals could be linked to obviously communities progressing. So two parts to the question. If you were to reflect back on your journey of 8 years, were there any points where you said, you know what, I think we're completely doing it wrong, or this is not the way to go about it, we have to change dramatically? And when you were confronted with such a situation, what was your reaction response? Two, of course, in the pre-COVID, post-COVID world, everybody is talking about the new normal, whatever that normal is, which requires all of us to adapt ourselves to the situation and figure out what is the best path forward. So what's your advice to organizations and folks who are listening in? What is the mantra to make this adaptation work well?
Great question, and so relevant, I think, to the kind of work we do. I'm saying very relevant because, Madan, I think, like all of us know, there are organizations that have stayed true to a particular philosophy and over time really lost relevance. So I think what you are really talking about, how do we continue to stay relevant in the space that we operate in changing times? And this is very unusual as a time as we speak. So I think great question. I don't think I can advise on, or there are no straight answers on this, Madan, frankly. In the past, you asked a question saying, were we confronted with these kind of choices? Of course we were. I mean, to give you an example, which you are also familiar with, we used to operate a rural BPO in Rajasthan, where we would work with women who are not so well educated, train them, and then do work for corporates, right? I think despite offering possibly quality which was as comparable as an urban BPO at half the price for a cause which no one could really deny, there was just no way we could really scale that. So one is, I think, saying that, is the solution effective? And are we developing something which actually solves a problem? Yes, in our own small way, we are solving a problem. But end of the day, I can't get away from the question saying, are we efficient enough? To me, effectiveness and efficiency, in a sense, go together. You might be extremely effective, but if you are not efficient at a price point, so to say, you don't have a reason to exist. And it was, I think, a very painful decision, and we had to move to work in that rural BPO, got kind of moved into a different part of the organization. But I think it's really, I think the adaptability comes from saying, am I relevant? Am I effective? Am I efficient? But I think in today's times, to my mind, it's extremely different. I think today is possibly a question of survival in the short term. I think we have seen, again, enough examples where non-profits are really, again, in a very dire situation, and given what is going to happen to the whole funding scenario. So I think today it's a question of survival. It's really saying that, like COVID, today a lot of the focus is on relief efforts, and that will continue for some time. But does that mean that's the end all and be all and end all of everything that we need to do on COVID? Obviously not. So, for instance, in the foundation, we are saying that is important. We will continue to work with governments on relief efforts to see what is it that we can do to support that effort. But end of the day, at some point of time, whatever that time is, and I don't think we have necessarily a timeline to it, we have to start moving into saying what is it that we need to do to make the systems more resilient. God forbid, with another situation 10 or 20 years down the road, will the system be in a better shape to handle the situation? Should it be a pandemic? But I think it's really saying that today what you survive will do all the work. over time to be able to kind of last out that period to kind of make that kind of contribution.
Correct.
So no, I don't think there are easy answers. I think all
Yeah.
of us know that each one has a very different context. But I think it is a very difficult time, and especially I'm sure for social enterprises, for kind of at the cusp of making the next break.
Yeah.
There is a break to their efforts, but I think just need to hang in there, survive, and manage your cash flow as diligently as we would do in our households. I think
Correct.
that is extremely crucial.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. No, I think we're running to the end of the time. The last hour seems passed off in a flash. The nuggets of wisdom that you are sharing, Paresh. Fascinating because end of the day, it is common sense. But as I say, common sense is not very common nowadays. And sometimes we get too swept up by the hyperboles that exist around us. But it's been really fascinating. I know we can go on for hours and hours on this conversation, but I think this is a good start. I know we'll get to much more layers of the conversation as the day proceeds. But really, thank you for your time, Paresh, and all the interesting nuggets of both inspiration as well as wisdom that you shared. Lots to take away personally for me. It was I was actually reliving my own journey over the last several years as you were talking and figuring out, how several of the things you said applied to various situations that I faced. So thank you so much for your time. And,
thank you, Madan. I think it was great having this conversation. I think both of us have gone through that journey of having transitioned from the corporate sector into this sector many, many years ago. So it's always good to have a nice conversation rather than the Q&A session. So thank you for making it so lively. And again, thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it. Ritu, over to you.
Yes. Thank you, Madan and Paresh, for giving us these wonderful insights onto the topic of pivoting with the scale for social enterprise and NGOs. We really acknowledge and appreciate your inputs and your insights on this topic. Vishal?